Hello and welcome to Think Watercolour. For today's demonstration I wanted to show how you can take a fairly ordinary subject like this broken farm gate leaning against a dry stone wall and turn it into a useful practice sketch for painting stone and timber. I painted the sky first using cobalt blue and then added some lavender. I turned the board upside down to allow the pigment to spread downwards so that the sky ended up darker at the top. I then let the sky dry and rotated the board and painted the wall with a light wash with yellow ochre. As I did this, I left patches of white paper here and there for highlights. And then I added some sap green at the base. Once the first wash was dry, I began to add the darker tones, and to suggest the roughness of the rocks, I used the body of the brush by holding it fairly flat to pick up the texture of the paper. I used a few different colours for this: burnt sienna, raw sienna, cobalt teal and cerulean blue, and I just let them bleed and mix together to create a variety of tones. And this second wash will dry lighter, as all watercolours do, and I'll be adding some darker tones and shadows when it's dry. I'm using Saunders Waterford 300-gram rough high white paper, by the way, and the brush I'm mostly using is an Escoda Perla size 12. For the gates I'm using a mix of cobalt blue with some burnt sienna to create a cool grey, and blending in areas of burnt sienna wet in wet to create a variety of colours and values in the wood. For the darkest shadows between the rocks in the wall, I've mixed up some Prussian blue and some pyrrole orange to make a strong black. As I've said on many occasions, I don't have black in my palette. I prefer to mix my own blacks as they have more vibrancy that way. When I first started using watercolours many years ago, I found that the black from a pan or a tube always seemed to look flat when dry. So I started mixing my own and have done so ever since. You can make blacks from any of your darkest primaries in your palette, and it's well worth practicing with whatever colours you use. And by the way, if you want to paint really thin lines when you're using a larger size brush, such as a size 12 or bigger, as long as it's a quality brush and has a good point, all you have to do is hold the brush vertically to your paper. All it takes is a little practice. I apologise for this short section where the camera was out of focus, and all I've done is painted the rusty old hinge with some burnt sienna and pyrrole orange, and then I dropped a tiny amount of ultramarine into the mix. Adding the shadows to the broken timbers and the final darker tones on patches of the rocks gives them depth and three-dimensionality. For the darker areas of the grass, I used jadeite green with a touch of ultramarine, and whilst the darker patches were still wet, I used a rigger to drag the paint up for some blades of grass. I then added some sap green to blend down towards the foreground grass. And finally, when everything was dry, I added some more blades of grass with some dark green and some white gouache. Also, once I'd finished the painting, I noticed that I'd forgotten to add the cracks in the wood of the gatepost, so I added those off camera. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this quick practice sketch of use. Do try painting some thin lines with a larger brush, as long as it's got a good point. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. It always helps with YouTube. And do subscribe if you're not a subscriber, and hit the notification bell for my future videos, which I tend to post once a week if I can. And thanks again for watching.